afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Snyder. I am the administrator for the Office of Accounting. You're not used to seeing bean counters up here, I'm sure. Most often you're looking at engineers and operations and fleet folks, so this is a little bit different picture for you. I'm actually going to talk about a couple of different things that we've done at ODOT that are pretty significant customizations, but they were done on purpose and for very good reason, because they help us with a lot of our financial processes, and that's why you have the bean counter to speak about it. So the first one I'm going to talk about is PEC, Planning, Engineering, and Construction module. This is a completely new module that was developed for us, and the reason that we did this, well, let's go with a little background first. So Planning, Engineering, and Construction is the office that most people don't track activity-based costing and so forth. So back in June of 2014, ODOT replaced our legacy cost accounting system, which was called EMS TMS, essentially housed our fleet repair orders, it housed our roadway maintenance, it housed our consumable inventory, some other items. But the thing that it also housed, which was unique to ODOT, was that we had planning, engineering, and construction administration there. So everything from our environmental offices to our design work to actual construction inspection that was performed by in-house personnel, we actually record effort in our systems to keep up with that. So why do we do that? Number one, in the early 2000s, our leadership determined that one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that we're tracking and identifying what is the effort that ODOT specifically puts in towards developing, delivering, and administering our $2 billion construction program. When you're dealing with a $2 billion construction program, not only do you care what the contractors and consultants are doing, what the construction people are doing out there for you, what is the effort that ODOT has to put into that specifically? And so this was one way that we felt we could do it. Secondary reason, FHW reimbursement. I know a lot of agencies, a lot of DOTs use their payroll for federal highway reimbursement on construction effort. We chose not to do that a long time ago because we did want to track this effort already within our cost accounting system. And so we use payroll, but in a little bit of a different way. Kind of the baseline of it is we feed every night an interface from our payroll system that feeds the hourly rates for the PEC folks into our AgileAssets system. So as they record work, we are actually picking up payroll at the same time. So it's a dual method of doing it, but we actually do use payroll. We just use it from an interface perspective. And then the third reason that we do it is, I heard earlier this morning, the conversation was around billable hours for consultants. ODOT wants to know what kind of billable hours do we have. Even though we're not going to bill anyone outside of the feds, we do want to know what kind of effort we're putting in. Again, direct labor. You know, what are we doing on project basis versus just administrative duties versus non-project core functions. We may have some functions like some environmental work that may happen before a project is actually initiated and authorized by the feds, and we may not actually create a project for it, but we still want to track that. We consider that core function work. It's still direct work, may not be a billable hour, but it truly is direct work. So there's the need, exactly what I was just talking about. We want to capture all of our activities that are performed by our planning, our engineering, and our construction folks that are to administer this $2 billion construction program, and we want to capture them broken out into those categories of direct, indirect, and leave. Further, you want to take those direct activities that we are performing, and we want to identify which of those direct activities are specific to a project. Hence, we're talking billable hours again, just like we were talking this morning. What that does is give us the ability to actually compare our billable hours, percentages, and those sorts of things to what a consultant might have, to see how efficient we really are at doing our jobs. And then further, we want to identify those project work by phase, which is exactly how you wind up billing the feds, the planning and engineering, construction phase, right-of-way phase, and planning and research phases. So what we actually do is we take, for our work orders and for our activities in these particular areas, every single activity has a direct indirect leave code. It has either a PID or a non-PID code, which is a project. And then further, it actually identifies what phase of work it is. So once it goes through the process, all of that has already been identified, and we can push it on forward to the feds. So here's how it works. Just very high level, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because there's a lot of detailed things that happen in the background. But essentially, every night we do an interface. The interface comes from our capital project management system. It's an internal capital project management system, and every one of our projects, as I said, they're called PIDs at ODOT. Again, we like acronyms like everybody else. It's a project identifier, go figure. So we feed every one of those into AgileAssets every night. What AgileAssets does automatically creates the AgileAssets project and work orders immediately as soon as those are brought into the system. Nobody has to go in and create a work order every day. You don't have to set up a project. It's done for us as soon as it's an active project in our capital project system. The next day it's in our system and it's already set up and ready to go. You can also set up what are called non-capital projects. So again, I said before, there may be some things that haven't been established and haven't actually gotten a PID yet, the project ID number, but you can actually manually set up something, for an environmental research study that we're doing that's not going to be reimbursed by the federal government or anything else. We can still capture that cost, and we can show that we are working on that direct labor kind of circumstance, but it's just not to a federal reimbursable project. And then the employees simply go into what's called the labor summary by pay period screen. I believe, Derek, you might correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't this called the timesheet initially? Yes. Something like that. We renamed it labor summary by pay period on purpose so that it didn't get confused with our payroll timesheets. So we call it a labor summary by pay period. Employee just logs right into that. They simply insert a new line. When they insert the new line, and I'll show you this in a second, you basically select the project number, you select the activity, you insert, you add your hours, and you're done. It's a very simple process for the field personnel. The value that we get out of this on the back end for the little bit of effort that they have to put in, it's astronomical. The other thing that's kind of important to note here is we do not require them to capture any material or equipment usage. So the baseline is this system, or this module, was based very heavily and started out kind of as the maintenance management system, and they just gutted some of these primary pieces like the equipment and the materials that they don't need to see, they're never going to use, and then streamline the recording so you're not actually going into a day card, you're going into this labor summary by pay period screen, which in effect in the back of the system is a day card. So let's take a look. Essentially, I think you guys should be able to see a little bit. And I'm sorry that we're still on 6.9. You've been seeing a lot of good, fun 7.1 stuff out here, and we're not going to get to see it with us yet. We're not there. So giving us a little bit of time here. So basically what we're looking at here, this is the Ellis feed that is our projects. Our capital projects are automatically fed into the system here. So you've basically got these ideas. You've got project over here. You've got the actual different categories and different pieces of information about the actual project that are already in our capital project management system. Nobody has to re-enter that information. It's just brought over on a nightly basis. Down below here, you see our asset types. The asset types in this circumstance are a little bit different. We basically set them up to create a filter for our activities. So, for example, if I'm in our central office planning division, the activities and the work orders that are available to me are only those that are associated with my office. I wouldn't be able to enter or put any time in on a construction work order because that's not me and that's not the asset category that I'm working in right now. Additionally, these projects are all set up on a statewide basis, so anybody in the state can charge to them because we do utilize cross-district, central office, and district combinations of effort. So it's accessible to anyone who's actually doing work on the projects. So that's the basics of how the project is set up and how it gets into the system. Now, kind of turn the hat here a little bit, and I'm going to be the employee who's working, happens to be in this case, working in the planning and engineering office. It's a little harder to see on this screen. What's the name we got up on here for this one? So we've got Catherine Bowman is the individual that we're looking at here. Basically, she just logs into this screen, which is the labor summary by pay period that I was discussing earlier. It's the first step to getting in that. And up in the upper left corner, you see a date. That's the pay period that she selected and said, this is the pay period I want to enter my time for. Goes down, selects her name, and then the next thing she's going to see is pretty much a timesheet. Pretty simple stuff. Each one of those lines has is a work order. So you're looking at the description that's on the left there, includes a couple of very specific things. The very first thing on a project that you'll see, if it's a PID project, is the project manager's name. That is the person who's ultimately going to be responsible for approving all of the labor that gets charged to that project. We do not have our supervisors, our immediate supervisors, approving time on our actual federal projects. We have the project manager do it, or a project engineer, someone who has oversight of that project as a whole. They should be responsible and understand who's charging what to their jobs and really have a good handle on it. Some other things that you see on here, there's, well, a couple of different things. Let me see if it's easier to point here. Which one of these is my pointer? Top one. And sorry, I'm not ignoring you guys. I'll be over there in a minute. So you've got a couple of things. So let's just look at one of these particular lines. Let's look at the Kevin Fiant. There's a project there. The project number is actually 95294. It's for a culvert replacement, it looks like, and then there's an activity code right behind it, which is for design. So he's going to do, that's the project manager. He's got a project out there for some design work on this culvert. Again, Catherine is the one who signed in, so this is her timesheet. And she went across here and she charged 2.5 hours here, 2.5 hours here, 5 hours there. Very simple stuff. She just keys those in. Now, at the bottom of the screen, what you see is they actually, this is where they're doing an insert to add another work order. So they simply did, again, right-click, just like everything else in this system, very simple. You can select your actual PID, which is the project ID again. You can select the asset type, which will then filter the selection of activities, kind of streamlines it for the individual, so you're not looking at 200 activities, you got 12 to choose from, something of that sort. And then from there, once you've selected your activity, you do an insert, and then you go in and charge your time to it, just like you did with any other work order that's already there. It's very simple for the user to do. Now we switch gears a little bit here, and we're going to look at Mr. Kevin Fiant as the approver. So what Kevin has, he logs into a different screen, and it's just a PID labor approval. Again, no rocket science here. We're keeping it simple. And what he has, this is all of Kevin's projects that he's a project manager for. In this case, we've gone down and we've selected that particular project that we were just looking at. Has a total hours, and this is total hours for anyone who is charged to his project, just kind of gives him an idea of a running total. And then if we come down here, we actually can see Catherine, same information. There's the 5 hours on August 16th, the 2.5 on August 9th, 2.5 on August 8th. He's gone in, he's just identified that he's got to approve that. Now this window here is specifically designed to only show unapproved hours. Once someone has approved hours down here, it'll hit those totals on these two different other panels, but it will disappear down here. So he's only got to look at the stuff that's unapproved right now. He's already taken care of the rest. And the beauty of this is, again, you can select approve on each one of those individually, or you could just kind of skim all your labor that's out there, right-click, approve all, you're done approving. You've just now taken care of all of your approvals. This side, again, this is basically the summary for that project of all the people who have charged to it. So it's just kind of giving him a roll-up of all the individuals as well. And that's as simple as it is for approving time and getting the labor in there. I mean, we've really kind of tried to keep it simple. Our engineers, our construction inspection folks, to be quite honest, since implementation, this has been the module that we have that is the absolute favorite, because it is so simple. You don't have to do a lot. I go in once a day, once a week, and we actually require our folks to go in and enter their time within 48 hours. And basically, we tell them just go in every day and enter your time, and they don't have any problem with it. They do it once a day, it's in, it's taken care of. So again, what do we get out of this? The direct labor ratio. Again, this is a measure of efficiency and effectiveness. To us, the direct labor ratio, remember those activities, everything that they charged in there has an activity, or has we call it an overhead flag that says it's either direct, it's overhead, or leave, indirect being overhead. Our department considers this to be significant enough that it's one of our top critical success factors. We expect our folks in the field and all of our core function, and when I say core function, we define the core function as anything from planning, designing, constructing, and maintaining the highway system. That's a core function. If you're doing any of that, you're direct. We expect all of our folks to be 70% direct. When it comes down to it, we will measure every office on a 70% direct ratio. If you're not, you're probably going to get a phone call from somebody and want to know why. Now, me being in finance, let's think about this for a second. I'm never going to be 70% direct. I don't do those things, which makes sense. So we kind of get excluded from those calculations when you look at that, but that's why it's by office. They truly look at that as a very, very high-end measure for the department. We also calculate overhead rates for the internal offices. So a little bit different than when you're talking about federal billing. There's some federal billing overhead that you can do on an indirect cost allocation plan. I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is just a simple overhead rate by office. And the reason we do that, again, when we're costing our projects and we're trying to estimate what it takes for us to design a particular project, we want to include our overhead so that we're comparing ourselves one-to-one with a consultant. Consultant's going to charge us overhead, so why not compare it apples for apples and make sure that we're looking at the same things? So again, using those direct, indirect flags, we're able to accomplish that and create an overhead rate by year and apply that to any other direct costs and project costs that we have. I mentioned before, FHWA reimbursement. That phase work, we can immediately run reports out of here and determine what phase it is. And actually what we do, we feed this to our capital system, so we're feeding back all of the project work to our capital system. Once it hits that capital, the capital management system, it takes a look at those phases, and it already knows what we've been authorized to bill to the FHWA, because that's already loaded in that system. So we feed it in, and if I worked on, I did some P&E today and I did some construction today on the same project, if we're only authorized for P&E, it'll bill the feds for P&E. It won't bill the construction work that I did because we're not authorized to get those funds back yet. It knows the difference. So all this kind of plays hand in hand. They don't have to figure that out once we get to that point. We've already told them what phase of work we're doing. And ultimately, in the past few years, each year we've billed back the feds for our internal labor from planning, engineering, construction, roughly $25 million a year. So we're getting additional reimbursement just based on this. Sure, you've got the $2 billion construction program that you're billing as well, but I'll take $25 million anytime you're going to hand it over to me as well. This is an easy way to get it. What else do we have? The indirect cost allocation plan. So again, similar to the federal billing, whenever you bill the feds, you have the ability to also bill a certain amount of overhead. We calculate this specific type of overhead, and it's a little different from our internal, because our internal overhead, we basically apply every overhead cost to that we can, just to get a maximum number. With the feds, they're a little more picky about what you can bill them when it's indirect costs. They're not going to pay for all of it. There's certain allowable and unallowable costs. So we actually use this and we bill them. So when I say we bill them, $100,000 on a week's bill, we actually apply another 100% to that and we get $200,000. That's our overhead. We calculate that rate again on an annual basis and we apply it to it and we get double the money. Pretty simple stuff for what the effort is to get the information in. And then ultimately it's for resource management. We want to know exactly what we're most efficient at. When we talk about comparing ourselves with consultants, we want to know what we're good at and make sure that that's the stuff that we're doing in-house. We're not going to farm out the work that we're the best at. If we know that we can do it better than them, we actually have some other measurements within our organization that our planning, engineering, and construction folks are now required to budget their projects. We can now come back and show them, here's what the internal costs are against that budget, and they can measure how are they doing against those sorts of things. So that is planning, engineering, and construction in a nutshell. That's one of the two processes. So any questions on this one before I move on to the other one? We're going to shift gears completely when we go there.
I do have a question.
Yes, Stuart.
You got a microphone? Jim, thank you for that very good overview. And I was very interested in one of the last points you were making there in terms of basically competing with the private sector in terms of doing the maintenance work and calculating your overhead rates and getting more efficient. And I think that's awesome because there's more and more privatized maintenance. And I've seen it in a few other agencies as well that have used our software, and they get challenged with contractors coming in to do mowing in a county situation, for example.
Mowing is one of the biggest ones we've used it for.
And they got high behind the internal folks and said, we can do it better than that. And so they kept their jobs, they kept it in-house by using our system to show that they were doing it cheaper than the contract rates. And so I really appreciate that aspect. And it can motivate your staff really well if you kind of advertise that, market that as a benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was probably, before we moved into Agile, we were already kind of doing this with our old legacy system. Of course, it was a little more complex and cumbersome. This makes it a lot more efficient for us to do. But yeah, we've looked at mowing. We've looked at several other activities that are very easily outsourced. There's plenty of folks out there that can do it for you. But we were able to go back in and say, wait a minute, look, we're recording exact effort against these activities. And then, like I said, when you come to the planning, engineering, and construction, the consultant's going to bill you overhead, so you might as well be comparing yourself apples to apples with them on certain jobs. If you know you can do the work and they can do the work, well, let's figure out which ones are the right ones for us to keep in-house.
Exactly.
Any other questions on this? Okay, let's move into a completely different world. And this is our third-party fleet parts ordering process. Mouthful. But a very good program. It's been a very beneficial program for us overall, as well as when we brought in Agile, it completely streamlined several processes for us that made this program much more successful as well. So again, a little background on this. In the fall of 2012, we implemented at ODOT a third-party parts supplier. We decided at that time that we wanted to make sure that our mechanics were not spending a majority or a significant portion of their day looking up parts on contracts, calling vendors trying to order parts, driving down the street to go pick up parts, waiting at the counter while the parts guy is getting the parts. Why are we doing all this? And to be quite honest, our mechanics were complaining about this significantly. They wanted to quit doing all these procurement functions. I was hired to be a mechanic, not to buy stuff. So we took on the effort back in 2012 and decided to do this strictly for our equipment parts. So for example, guardrail and things like that, we still purchase those through regular procurement methods. But for equipment parts, we've gone to a third-party parts supplier. Additionally, we can do some small garage-related tools, those types of things, but it's really kind of focused on the garages. And I'll apologize now, I'll probably say Mancon quite a bit, because that is the vendor who is our third-party parts supplier, and that's just our normal terminology at this point. So know that when I say that, that's who we're talking about. So again, back before AgileAssets, we were doing all of this in a mainframe where it managed all of our consumable inventory. It was all tracked in this one mainframe, and all of our repair orders were done in the same mainframe system. So we decided it's time to move on to, bring on AgileAssets, and here we are today. So what I'm going to walk you through now is kind of the old process and how it worked when we were in our legacy system, and then we'll move into the new process and kind of show the steps that it saved, and then I'll again show you some high level, some of the more important screens that we use and the things that are available in those. So the old process, before we had AgileAssets, and this was quite cumbersome. You can ask any of our mechanics. I know, Dwayne Byers is here. He's one of our equipment managers that he quite remembers this process that was much more cumbersome than what we do today. So basically what we would do is when an ODOT mechanic needed a part, so whether it's an alternator, radiator, tires, whatever, they would go into a SharePoint order form and fill out what's called a parts request. Once they filled out that parts request in this SharePoint order form, the vendor, Mancon, would get an email saying, hey, you've got a new parts request. Well, they'd print that parts request off from the email. Then they'd go out in their shop, they'd fill the order, they'd order the parts from wherever they were going to get them from. Then here's where the fun part comes in. They would enter all of that same information that was on the SharePoint form into their system so that they could have the record in their system for billing purposes. Well, again, here we are with systems that don't talk. So then they had to come over, and they actually had access to our legacy system, and they would once again enter the parts and the receipt of the parts into our system. Then they would go to the next level and enter the charging of the parts to the repair order in our system. So these guys are entering the same data 3 and 4 times. Very, very ripe for error, as you all know. The fat fingers, the just picked the wrong line when I was trying to enter something. And we had a very hard time making sure that we were reconciling. So, when I say that they entered the parts request into their own system, they were doing that for billing purposes. So at the end of the month, they would accumulate all of that they entered into their system, ship it off to us. Then we would go out and pull a report from our system to see what actually got entered into our system and approved, and then try to reconcile the two. Well, with all that manual entry, you can imagine the volume of errors that we had between these two systems. So again, these are kind of those pain points, vendor filling and shipping the order. So when they go and fill and ship the order, they had to go back to SharePoint and say, yep, I filled the order, it's now shipped. Then they had to enter it into their own system. Then they turn around and enter it into our system. Then they enter the actual charge of the work order. And then our mechanic can actually go in and say, yep, we're good. A lot to go on there. And to be honest, I'm going to skip this slide because it's really kind of redundant to the next one here. So here's what it looks like with AgileAssets. The mechanic actually enters the parts request directly from the repair order in AgileAssets. So you've got an open repair order in AgileAssets, and I'll show you in a minute exactly how they do that. You click a button and it opens a parts request screen. It's right there in the system. The vendor gets an email and they get a system notification. They typically, depending on which shop they're in, most of the vendors will actually print that actual parts request right from AgileAssets. We've created a report. They can just print it right there. And then they go to the next step of filling that order just like they did before. However, they're in AgileAssets still. They don't have to go back to SharePoint and say, yep, I shipped that order. Yes, I filled that order. They don't have to go into another system again. They're just continuing to do it all right here. Number 5 is they enter the parts request into their own system. Unfortunately, that still occurs. We have not been able to build an interface at this point between the request and the actual vendor system. And the reason for that actually was the vendor that we've been working with, Mancon, their system was incompatible at the time. So they've recently just upgraded to a new version of what they use, and so we're about to re-engage with them and try to build that actual interface to eliminate this step as well. But what happens here, so what they do now is when they enter it into their system, they actually send us a flat file, if you will. They send us a file, a batch file every night of all the transactions. We pull a report, and I don't have all this listed there, but we have an Access database where we'll pull a report out of AgileAssets. We'll pull that flat file that they send us and do a comparison. Let it go look for all those errors instead of us having to do it like we were in the old way. It now spits out all these different unique things. So typically what we're looking for there is they'll put the wrong parts request number. You know, there's an identifier on each request. They'll put the wrong request number in their system, or they'll put the wrong vehicle number. Well, our database will kick those out, and we can get those fixed pretty easily. I think we run that every day, and it 10 minutes for us to fix anything that was in error. Once we've done that, we'll tell them, okay, we're ready. Then they'll go ahead and they'll ship us a final file, and we'll load it right into AgileAssets, and we're done. Everything's there. 6 and 7, there's no need for a mechanic to even enter a parts receipt. There's no need for anybody to charge the parts to the repair order. It's done. It's already there. All the mechanic has to do is go in and say, got it, got it, got it, close it. We're done. So let's take a look at this. This is exactly how it works. For those of you who are familiar with the repair order screens, this is your typical repair order in the background. I'm talking about what's at the top here and on the left. This is something you'll recognize. What you won't recognize is this little guy here that says material request. Yes. You click that button and it opens up this world. So what this is a listing of all of the individual material requests that have been placed against this repair order. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ones that are on there that people have requested parts. Some are completed, some are in progress, some of them are still in the new request stage. So basically what you do is they go in and they do a right click. Again, just like everything else in the system, you right click, you do an insert, you put some basic information in there. It already knows most of the information from the repair order, so you don't have to fill that in, it's done. Then you go down here and you actually fill in the individual parts that you want. In this case, he's got some capacitors, some real specific description. He puts in a quantity, and here you can have multiple lines for the one parts request. So you can have up to 100, 150. I don't think there is a limit, to be honest with you, that we've ever seen. You can put as many lines on one parts request. So if I needed tires, I needed an alternator, I could add those right below that, and it all ships to, sends that notification, sends the email to the vendor all at once. They get the notification, they're set. That's all the mechanic has to do to get his parts ordered. Turn the hat again. Now I'm in the vendor's shoes. And actually there's several different things you can do from here. We keep talking about ordering directly from a repair order. There's also times where we will want to order parts from this vendor and actually put them on stock and not charge them to a repair order. We just need some things to be on the shelf. We can do that right here from the materials management page. It's just a little different way that we go about it, and there's a parts request screen or window within there. And essentially you're doing the same thing. In this case, all of the ones you see here that have an equipment number and a repair order number, obviously those were done specifically to a repair order. The beauty of this as well, this is what the vendor sees. So they're looking at a specific line, say it's this line here, and it's got 3 parts on it. Okay, they've got all the information they need to fill the order. That's not a problem. If there's something down in here that they're really unclear about, or they're not sure what this type of vehicle is, they can click on that link. It takes them directly to that vehicle inventory page, and it gives them all the specs on that particular vehicle. It will give them VIN number, it will give them engine size, whatever we've added into that inventory screen, they can see it right from there. So it gives them lots more information. Old way, hey mechanic, what's the VIN number on this? Because I'm not sure what it is. I need more information. So that's the one thing you can do. Or again, you can right click in here, insert a new order, and you can say that I want this just to be I want it to be received to my shop inventory as opposed to a piece of equipment. I don't have that shown here, but that's what you can do. Trying to think, what else do we have on this screen? Oh, down here. Remember we were saying that they had to go back to SharePoint to update ship status, build status, all that. Nope, right there. We're all still in the same window that they go into every day, all day long. They live in this window for ODOT. That's what they do. So they go through, they take a look at this, they fill their order. The vendor ships it, they do everything they have to do. They send us that file that I was talking about before that we can do the quick comparison. And then ultimately what they do is they send us this guy. This is called a buffer table. It's basically a data set of everything that was done the prior day that we've already gone through and validated, and we're setting it and staging it for an official load. The reason that we stop here is because we store this data all the way up through the end of the month. This is what we reconcile our invoice against at the end of the month. They're going to bill us from their system. This is what gets loaded into Agile. At the end of the month, we do one comparison on the two. We can typically do an entire statewide reconciliation. If there are no errors, a couple hours. If there's a few errors, it might take us a day just to figure out what those errors were. It's usually something unique that we didn't pick up in our database check that we were doing. But really, again, all the data for the entire month, one spot, we can do the comparison, it's done. Don't think there's anything else on this screen that we really utilize. So once we get this, we actually run the interface and we say, okay, load it. And this is what the mechanic will see. Mechanic this is back to that original repair order. Again, nothing new here. We're not looking at anything we haven't seen before. Difference is now we have other costs. Most people don't use the other costs tab unless they're doing outside labor or outside services or something of that sort. We actually feed these parts into this other cost tab to separate them from our internal materials that we would issue from our own stock. So it's just kind of a way to segregate the two, make sure that we've got everything the way it needs to be. So essentially, yeah, the mechanic can go in, bang, same thing, go and approve them. I got my parts, or I can do a right click, approve all, I'm done. So it really is, I mean, it's a very efficient process when it comes down to it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's lots of other things that happen. You know, we have back orders, we have core returns, we have lots of different things. It handles it all. I mean, I can't get into all the details in a session like this, but it does handle all of that kind of stuff. So back to, what do we get out of this? Mechanics, less time ordering. They are not buying stuff. They don't want to buy stuff. They never have wanted to buy stuff. Sometimes they like to run down to the shop and chat with their buddy at the counter, but at the same time, they'd rather not buy stuff all the time. We even did a few studies on this whole process, and a mechanic could spend a pretty significant amount of time just looking up parts on contracts, talking to vendors and things, trying to figure out who's got the lowest price. It's kind of crazy. So, we'll get them back to turning wrenches. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what they want to do. That's what we hired them for. Let's get them doing it. Obviously, we just talked about it, less errors from all the duplicate entry. I mean, we would spend probably about a week to a week and a half doing that monthly reconciliation in the past, trying to line up all the data points. Like I said, we can do it in a matter of hours at this point for the most part. Future, talked about it a little bit earlier. Vendor's now up to speed. They've just updated their systems. We're going to go with a full integration. So now that parts request, we're going to figure out how to feed it right into their system. The only thing they're going to have to add back to it is their part number, the cost, if it's a back order or something like that. All the rest of this reconciliation can go away. We can get rid of our database and we can move forward. So high level, I understand, but that's pretty much what we do, and it's been a very valuable process for us. Again, questions? Sure.
How you doing, Jim? Steve Wilcox from New York. Have you guys, have you developed analysis tools for parts modeling? Our equipment parts costs have gone up $3 million a year, every year for the last 5 years. We spend more money on, we spend 3 times as much money on equipment parts as we do on all equipment that it's not snow and ice. So that is something we're trying to get at the root of. You know, how many parts do we have on the shelf? How much is actually going out, has work that's gone out to vendor repair gone up significantly? Is it because we switched from Mac to international? You know, we got a bunch of parts for the equipment that we've gone to another vendor. We're trying to get at the root cause of that. You know, is it because we had a bad winter? Can you tie the part back to the equipment, back to the winter? Those kind of things to try to figure out what the trends are and to get a better handle of this rapid growth in parts.
You know, you're absolutely right. And my office hasn't been charged with that. I know our equipment division, our equipment management office does look at those types of things. I don't know how in-depth they've gotten with it. It'd be interesting to get together with them. It's a great point. I'll take that back and make sure we bring that to them. But one of the things that we've actually charged this vendor with, and now that we've got some good solid data, you know, in the past, we had lots of different part numbers for different things. Well, they're ordering the same parts for us now all the time. We can pretty much get a gauge on what we've got and do some analysis on that. What we've found, they actually come to us quite frequently and say, hey, you know these brake chambers you're buying? This guy's buying the Cadillac, this guy's buying the mid-range, and this guy's buying the low. I can tell you they're all coming out of the same manufacturer's shop, just a different label on them. Go buy this one. They're helping us with that process overall. I mean, that's one of the things we're working on, a part standardization process. You know, get our fleet to where we're ordering all one brand of oil filters across the state. Guess what? You get a pretty healthy discount. These guys are big enough that they can leverage that discount with other customers and really get us a price cut. You know, not necessarily an agile thing, but you know, as part of that process, this particular contract, we do not pay a markup on parts. It's strictly an administrative fee. So it doesn't matter if we buy 1 part, 20 parts, 1,000 parts. We pay them the same amount every month to administer this program.
Do you allocate parts funds on a monthly basis so that you can do some sort of resource leveling throughout the year?
No, we actually, we budget our operating budgets to our districts once a year, and they move the money where they see fit. There's a level of justification at the budget budget time of the year where they have to say this is what we think we'll need, and of course somebody will look at historical and say, you know, wait a minute, why are you asking for twice the budget you did last year for parts? But no, we basically allow the districts the autonomy to do what they need to with their operating budgets once it gets out to the field.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else?
We probably got time for one more question if we have it out there. It's great. Business processes, removing error through automation and value for your constituents. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
And we love to see this. It's awesome.
Great.
Jim, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's thank Jim.
Appreciate it.